Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. A cascade of golden lights spilled across the grand ballroom as servers in crisp white shirts weaved between guests, balancing trays of champagne flutes. Soft jazz murmured through hidden speakers, yet there was a crackling undercurrent of tension that Lucian Caldwell couldn't quite place. Tonight was supposed to be his 40th birthday celebration, a milestone that he'd hoped to mark with a modest sense of accomplishment. Instead, the atmosphere felt off. He stood near a marble pillar, swirling a glass of sparkling water he hadn't touched. Everyone else seemed to be drinking in earnest, flashing bright smiles that never reached their eyes. Lucian caught a whiff of expensive perfume mixed with cologne so strong it made him almost dizzy. He smiled politely at one of Winston Archer's business associates, who mumbled a hasty greeting before darting away like a startled fish. Lucian's wife, Audra Archer Caldwell, was on the far side of the room. She wore a sleek emerald gown that hugged her figure perfectly, but her eyes stayed distant, almost guarded. When she finally glanced over at Lucian, she gave the faintest curve of her lips more duty than warmth, before turning her attention to a silver-haired councilman who was praising the Archer family's influence in city politics. Winston Archer, Audra's father and the formidable CEO of Archer Holdings, strode into the spotlight with that trademark aura of authority. He lifted a hand in greeting. At his side was a man Lucian recognized immediately, though he hadn't seen him in years: Jasper Cross, Audra's college boyfriend. Jasper exuded casual confidence, his sandy hair neatly styled, his tailored suit more fashion-forward than half the men in the room. For a moment, it felt like the music lowered itself to a hush. Audra spotted Jasper, and something flickered in her eyes, an emotion Lucian couldn't decode. Then she looked away quickly. An awkward ripple seemed to pass through the crowd. Lucian forced a polite nod at Winston, who responded with a thin-lipped grin that betrayed no warmth whatsoever. A disembodied voice crackled over the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, may we have your attention, please? The Archer family would like to invite the birthday gentleman himself, Mr. Lucian Caldwell, to say a few words." All eyes swung toward Lucian. He set down his untouched glass, let out a slow exhale, and crossed the gleaming marble floor. The soft jazz died away, replaced by expectant silence. He stepped onto the small stage near the head table and adjusted the microphone. "Thank you," he began, scanning the sea of faces. Before he could continue, one of the uniformed servers stepped onto the stage and handed him a small white envelope. On its surface, in tall, bold letters, was scribbled "Urgent." A few scattered chuckles rippled through the crowd, but a strange hush smothered the laughter. Audra stood behind Jasper, arms folded over her chest, gaze locked on Lucian. Winston Archer watched with intense curiosity, arms behind his back. Lucian hesitated, then tore open the envelope. He pulled out a set of legal documents and froze. They were divorce papers, bearing Audra's neat, impeccable signature. The air itself seemed to vanish from the room. For a split second, Lucian's mind went blank. Every single guest stared at him, some feigning shock, others wearing expressions that suggested they already knew. He looked up, meeting Audra's eyes. She didn't flinch, didn't hide. Her posture stiffened, as if she had prepared for this moment. Across the crowd, Winston Archer stepped forward with theatrical concern. "This is unfortunate," Winston announced gravely, though his voice carried a note of condescension. "But perhaps we shouldn't be entirely surprised. There have been financial issues at Archer Holdings under Lucian's management. Sometimes personal matters bleed into business, I'm afraid." A low murmur rippled through the guests. Jasper Cross took the opportunity to edge closer to Audra, murmuring something into her ear. She shrugged him off gently, but a flicker of frustration darted across her face. Lucian's throat felt tight, his pulse hammering in his ears. He inhaled slowly, forcing calm. This was a public ambush. He realized it must have been carefully staged and orchestrated humiliation. For a moment, images flared behind his eyes, scenes of a painful past he rarely let himself recall. He remembered his parents' faces that had become ghosts crushed by a financial scandal that involved the Archer name. Then he saw a quick mental flash of a message on his phone from earlier. Marcus Hale. We need to talk. Found something big. He clenched the divorce papers. The weight of betrayal pressed on his chest, but he wouldn't give these people the satisfaction of seeing him break. Instead, he slowly lifted his chin, letting his gaze travel from Winston's smug expression to Jasper's smirk, and finally to Audra's unreadable eyes. He let out a short laugh, low, bitter, but resolute. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice cutting through the tension, "my heartfelt thanks for joining me tonight, but it seems the celebration has only just begun." A hush fell, heavier than before. In that instant, the crowd saw a different Lucian, not the mild, polite son-in-law, but someone colder, sharper. "I'll make this quick," Lucian continued. "I appreciate the courtesy of your surprise, and I promise you, I'm far from finished." Audra's face paled, but she held Winston's gaze as if silently steeling herself. Jasper shifted uncomfortably, his earlier grin now a flicker of uncertainty. The hush became deafening. Then, just as abruptly as it began, the soft jazz resumed, but the aura of polite festivity had shattered like glass. Lucian descended the stage, the divorce papers clutched in his fist. He nodded curtly to a few wide-eyed guests who stepped aside to let him pass. Outside the circle of bright chandeliers, the mansion's foyer lay in shadows, beckoning him to breathe for a moment. He paused at the threshold, cast one last glance back at Audra, his wife of several years, now a stranger, and gave a final, razor-thin smile. The tension felt like a silent explosion as he spoke quietly but firmly. "Have a pleasant evening, everyone." Then he walked away, leaving the hum of scandalized whispers in his wake. The morning sunlight slanted through half-open blinds, glinting off the polished wood of Lucian's penthouse living room. He dropped the duffel bag he'd been carrying onto a leather armchair and scrolled absently through his phone's notifications. As expected, dozens of messages and missed calls, many from numbers associated with Archer Holdings, some from curious friends wanting the latest gossip. But there was only one call he cared about returning: Marcus Hale. They had agreed to meet at Lucian's private office downtown, a space unaffiliated with Archer Holdings. He left the penthouse quickly, avoiding the concerned doorman's gaze, and drove across the city until he reached a modern glass building known only as the Seabrook Tower to outsiders. Marcus was waiting on the 17th floor, in a room that looked more like a high-tech command center than any typical office. Monitors lined the walls, each displaying graphs, spreadsheets, or discrete surveillance feeds. Marcus, a broad-shouldered man with neatly trimmed hair and a perpetual look of calm determination, greeted Lucian with a nod. "Rough night," Marcus said evenly. Lucian let out a mirthless chuckle. "You have no idea." Then he tossed the divorce papers onto a nearby console. "Audra blindsided me in front of 300 people. Winston hovered like a vulture. Jasper Cross, her ex, was right there by her side. The whole thing was a perfect little spectacle." Marcus exhaled slowly. "So they made their move." "More like a show of force," Lucian replied. "You said you had something?" Marcus walked to a panel of monitors, tapping a keyboard to bring up a spreadsheet. "I found a pattern of unauthorized transfers. Audra and Jasper appear to have set up channels to shift funds out of Archer accounts, then funnel them into a shell corporation. They're trying to pin the blame on you, like you were the one orchestrating embezzlement." Lucian stared at the screen, his jaw clenching. "They want to smear my name. If Winston convinces the board that I was funneling money, he has grounds to push me out of Archer Holdings completely, plus destroy my reputation in the financial sector." Marcus nodded. "It started months ago. Small amounts at first, but it's escalated in the last 2 weeks. And get this, some of the transactions are timed to coincide with major deals you handled. It looks like you personally authorized them, at least on paper." Lucian felt the knot in his chest tighten. He glanced at a snippet of code on the screen, verifying that indeed it mimicked his digital signature. A wave of anger mingled with hurt. Audra must have had access to private passcodes. "I never thought she would—" He shook his head, swallowing hard. Marcus's expression remained steady. "You've been married to her for years, Lucian. She knows your habits, your schedules, your digital footprints. Lucian's mind flashed back to the last few months. Audra working late, slipping out for mysterious appointments, returning home with an unapproachable mood. He recalled the times she hid her phone whenever he walked into a room, the countless nights he told himself he was just being paranoid. He clenched a fist on the table. They're not just divorcing me, they're setting me up for fraud or worse. Exactly, Marcus said grimly. But we can fight back. I've been collecting logs from Archer's servers. I can prove who actually made these transfers. Lucian inhaled, letting a flicker of relief surface. We'll need that evidence if we're going to turn the tables. Listen, Marcus added quietly. It's not just about you losing a job. Winston's an influential figure. If he wants, he can bury you in litigation or even get law enforcement on his side. Lucian studied the lines of data on the screen, eyes narrowing. I won't let them ruin my life, he said in a low voice. And I won't let Winston do to me what his circle did to my parents. That includes Farnsworth, if I'm correct about who's really behind Archer's expansions. Marcus hesitated. So you still believe Farnsworth is pulling strings? Ever since I stumbled onto those old records about Caldwell Investments, I've suspected it. Winston might be the face, but Farnsworth, he's got bigger connections. He's always in the shadows. Marcus nodded. If Winston is the blade, Farnsworth is the hand wielding it. Lucian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. He ignored it. We have to be systematic. First, I need to handle Winston and Audra's immediate strike. Then we peel back the layers. He turned to Marcus, his voice unwavering. They made their opening move at my birthday party. Let's show them they picked the wrong target. Marcus's eyes shone with determined solidarity. I'm in. What's the plan? Lucian tapped the divorce papers. Step 1. I defend myself in Archer's board meeting. Step 2. We publicly expose small but undeniable irregularities, something that implicates Winston's negligence, not mine. Step 3. We find definitive proof Farnsworth is involved. Marcus smiled grimly. Operation Payback, then? Lucian slid the papers off the desk, a cold edge in his gaze. Operation Payback, he agreed. And Audra, she'll regret blindsiding me. It was late afternoon when Lucian arrived at Archer Holdings headquarters, a towering skyscraper that dominated the city skyline. Sleek, reflective windows offered no glimpse of the drama unfolding within. Stepping into the polished foyer with its intricate marble floor, Lucian felt the tension prickle across his shoulders. His reflection in the elevator doors looked unnervingly calm, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Upon exiting on the executive level, he was greeted by a hush. Staffers avoided eye contact, quickly burying themselves in their tasks. Rumors traveled fast. By now, everyone must have known about last night's fiasco. Lucian marched toward the boardroom, an opulent space featuring a long mahogany table, plush leather chairs, and a panoramic view of the city. The double doors were ajar, and he heard Winston's resonant voice inside. Simply can't overlook this financial discrepancy, Winston was saying, tone clipped. Lucian stepped in. The entire board sat around the table, all eyes swiveling to him. Jasper Cross occupied Lucian's usual seat near Winston. It felt like an invasion, a subtle way to declare Lucian's replacement. Good afternoon, Lucian said, forcing a neutral expression. Winston stood. You're late, Lucian, he snapped, though the meeting time was technically still a few minutes away. Traffic, Lucian replied nonchalantly. I see we're already discussing my alleged wrongdoing. A board member cleared his throat. Mr. Archer and Mr. Cross have presented evidence suggesting you mishandled several $1 million in corporate funds. Jasper leaned back in Lucian's chair with a smug grin. Yes, evidence strongly indicates that certain transfers were authorized by your credentials, Lucian. Care to explain? Lucian's gaze flicked to Jasper, then to Winston. He allowed a brief pause, letting the tension build. If someone forged my signature or my digital IDs, then the question is, who stood to gain from framing me? A low murmur spread across the table. Winston's jaw tightened. Your mismanagement is not a matter of speculation. We've seen the logs. Lucian produced a slim folder. I have logs of my own. Inconsistencies that cast doubt on your so-called evidence, Winston. You sure you want to push this narrative? Winston's nostrils flared, but he stayed silent for a beat. Finally, he gestured to the rest of the board. "We simply want the truth." Jasper feigned concern. "We don't want to publicly damage your name, Lucian. But we must protect Archer Holdings." Lucian gave a short, humorless laugh. "How noble of you." He dropped a set of documents onto the table, copies that Marcus had curated. "There are timestamps on those transactions that conflict with my travel records, including official flight itineraries, so unless I can be in 2 places at once, I didn't authorize them." A flicker of hesitation passed over Jasper's face. Winston snatched up the papers, scanning them with quick eyes. The rest of the board members exchanged uncertain glances. Lucian seized the momentum. "I won't stand by while I'm made a scapegoat. If you want a thorough investigation, let's open all of Archer Holdings' accounts to an external audit." A faint gasp escaped a junior board member. Auditing everything would expose any skeletons. Winston had tucked away something he definitely wouldn't want. Winston cleared his throat. "Let's not get hasty. We can resolve this in-house." Jasper's smugness waned, and he shifted uncomfortably. The room felt as though a heavy curtain had lifted, letting new light rush in. Lucian leaned forward, pinning Winston with a direct stare. "I joined Archer Holdings out of loyalty to this family, but if my loyalty is rewarded with betrayal, I'll have no choice but to defend myself in court if necessary." The tension was palpable. A coil wound tight around everyone's nerves. Winston finally nodded stiffly. "We'll hold off any formal accusations for now. But we're not done here." "Nor am I," Lucian said simply. He turned and strode out, leaving the board members whispering among themselves. The subtle victory fueled his resolve. He was still in the crosshairs, but at least he'd stalled Winston's offensive. Stepping into the corridor, he allowed himself a single breath of relief. But as he passed an ornate mirror, he saw a reflection that told him the war was far from over. A quiet hush enveloped the private suite on the outskirts of the city, a location Lucian used for sensitive planning. The space was minimalistic. Exposed brick walls, thick concrete floors, and dim overhead lighting. Seated around a sturdy wooden table were Marcus Hale and 2 more individuals, Leon Drake and Fiona Mills, both former military intelligence who'd worked with Marcus years ago. They were the kind of people who understood discretion and owed their loyalty to Lucian for personal reasons. Stacks of printouts and a laptop glowed with data. Marcus rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Our preliminary assault exposing small but significant irregularities got Winston's attention, but he's going to push back harder." Leon Drake, a tall man with a scar just above his left eyebrow, spoke up. "I've got contacts in the city's real estate sector. Word is Winston might be leaning on political connections to keep any major investigation away from Archer Holdings." Fiona, arms crossed over her tactical jacket, added, "We've also seen unusual movement in Archer's offshore accounts. It's like they're consolidating funds in anticipation of a legal storm." Lucian frowned, glancing at the divorce papers that still lay on the table like a haunting reminder. "They're cornered, so they'll try to pin every wrongdoing on me. But Winston isn't the true puppet master." Marcus scrolled through a digital file. "You've mentioned Benedict Farnsworth a handful of times. I've begun a separate file on him, though much of his connections are obscured behind shell entities." Lucian nodded. "He's a ghost in the system. Winston's just the front. From what I remember about my parents' downfall, Farnsworth orchestrated multiple acquisitions. My father discovered anomalies right before everything collapsed." He paused, the memory tightening his throat. If the Archers had been complicit, Farnsworth was no doubt the real strategist. "All right," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "Short-term plan. Secure your position at Archer Holdings so you're not legally ousted. Maintain the heat on Winston with small leaks that undermine his credibility, but don't blow our cover story." Leon tapped a pen against the table. "We also need to think about Audra. She's Winston's daughter, but she's also your wife, at least legally for the moment." "Where does she fit in?" Lucian's gaze hardened. "She filed for divorce in the most humiliating way possible. She's definitely on Winston's side, or at least Jasper's. I won't trust a single word she says." Yet a pang of lingering sorrow stirred in his chest. Despite everything, Audra had once been the woman he loved, someone he believed he could build a future with. Now, that future lay in tatters. Fiona cleared her throat. Audra Archer is known for her social influence charity galas, media appearances. She can shape public perception. If she frames you as an unfit husband or a corporate criminal, it's damaging. But if we flip that narrative... Lucian inhaled slowly. I'm not sure she'll budge, but it's worth monitoring her moves. Marcus typed a quick note on his tablet. We'll keep our distance for now. Focus on Winston first. You said Farnsworth is just on the horizon. We can't tackle him without more intel. A phone buzzed, rattling the table. Lucian glanced at the screen, an unknown number again. He silenced it. They're probably trying to rattle me. Let them try. He rose from his chair. Here's the deal. I want you all to gather a more comprehensive timeline of Winston's suspicious deals, especially in the last 2 years. Cross-reference anything that might link Farnsworth to Archer's expansions. I'll handle the frontline confrontation at Archer Holdings. Everyone nodded in agreement. The mood in the room felt quietly determined. As midnight approached, Marcus and the others departed, leaving Lucien alone in the concrete-walled suite. He sat down heavily, flipping through the divorce papers under the single overhead lamp. The words felt clinical, like a final severing of something he had once cherished. His eyes hardened. Winston, Jasper, Audra, and possibly Farnsworth wanted him disgraced, exiled from the business world, maybe even behind bars. But Lucian Caldwell wasn't the naive young man who once believed in the Archer family's goodwill. He leaned back, staring up at the shadows dancing across the ceiling. His father's voice from long ago echoed in his memory. Always stand for what you've built, Lucian. Never let them take it from you. A promise to the dead, a vow to himself. He would bring down the entire corrupted empire if he had to. That night, the city lights flickered in the distance, like 1,000 silent witnesses. In Lucian's mind, a war had begun, and every piece on the chessboard was about to be tested. A drizzle of rain painted the morning streets as Lucian Caldwell navigated his car through the downtown area, heading to a discreet cafe near Seabrook Tower. Inside, he found Marcus Hale already seated, a laptop open before him and a half-finished cup of coffee at his elbow. We've got their attention, Marcus said in a low voice once Lucian sat down. That's good, Lucian replied, shrugging off his jacket. Now we turn up the heat. Marcus turned his laptop so Lucian could see. A flurry of digital headlines and brief finance columns flickered across the screen. Several smaller blogs and news sites had started reporting unusual accounting practices at Archer Holdings. Nothing earth-shattering, just enough to raise eyebrows. Remember that real estate deal Archer was about to finalize on the west side? Marcus asked. We leaked a few details about zoning irregularities. Reporters smelled blood in the water. Winston's under pressure to explain why Archer Holdings was pushing a project on land that might be reclassified for environmental protection. Lucian took a slow sip of his own coffee. Smart. Winston can't dismiss it as rumor if the city council gets involved. Marcus nodded. I also pulled some strings to highlight a questionable supply chain contract for Archer's new distribution center. That'll make them squirm. They'll deny everything, of course, but it eats away at their public image. A faint smile tugged at Lucian's lips. It wasn't pure revenge for the humiliating divorce stunt, though part of him relished watching Winston Archer squirm, but also a strategic move to keep the board from turning fully against him. If Archer Holdings' reputation faltered, Winston's status would weaken, giving Lucian the leverage he needed to stay in the game. And Winston's reaction? Lucian asked. He's panicking, Marcus replied. Not publicly, but I have a contact who says Winston's been calling old allies, looking for backup. Possibly even reaching out to a certain silent partner. That'd be Benedict Farnsworth, right? Exactly. So far, Farnsworth hasn't made a public statement or direct appearance. But Winston's definitely seeking his counsel. Lucian's eyes narrowed slightly. He'd heard Farnsworth's name whispered in financial circles for years, a man with deep pockets and deeper secrets. Let's see if Farnsworth decides to come out of the shadows, he murmured. Later that day, inside the towering Archer Holdings headquarters, Winston Archer paced in his executive office. The city's gray skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, matching the gloom in Winston's mood. He ended a phone call and slammed the receiver down, cursing under his breath. Kelly Reynolds, Winston's longtime assistant, stepped in gingerly. "Sir, the marketing department needs your approval on the updated press release. It addresses those rumors about irregularities in our real estate deal." "Rumors, my foot," Winston muttered. "They're sabotage." "Yes, sir. Do you want to add any statement regarding Mr. Caldwell?" Winston's gaze darkened. "No mention of Lucian unless absolutely necessary. We don't want the media connecting him to these disruptions." Kelly nodded and slipped out, leaving Winston alone with his thoughts. He reached for the phone again, flipping through his personal contacts until he found the number he wanted. "Mr. Farnsworth," Winston said in a subdued tone after someone picked up on the other end. "I need your guidance. Lucian Caldwell is causing more problems than expected." A calm voice responded, impossible to hear from the office door. Winston listened, chewing his lip, tension bunching the lines on his forehead. Before long, the conversation ended with a polite but firm click. Winston exhaled heavily. Farnsworth had promised nothing concrete yet, just a measured reassurance that all will be handled. But Winston couldn't shake the knot in his gut. Archer Holdings was at risk. In the hallway, a few employees exchanged knowing looks. Rumors of tension at the top had spread. The once untouchable empire showed small signs of cracks. That evening, Lucian got an update from Marcus via phone as he drove through the city. "Winston definitely reached out to Farnsworth," Marcus said. "My guess is Farnsworth advised him to stand firm and discredit the rumors." "Makes sense," Lucian replied, guiding his car into an underground parking garage. "They'll want a unified front. We'd better watch out for any counterattacks." "Agreed. I'll keep monitoring. Expect Winston to lash out soon. He's not the type to roll over and take the hits." Lucian parked, then leaned back in his seat for a moment. Outside, the hum of traffic and neon lights painted the city with an unsteady glow, like a stage set for a twisted play. This was only the first act of the fight he had started. Inside the Archer family's vast estate, Audra Archer Caldwell found herself pacing an ornate sitting room overlooking manicured gardens. Morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating expensive furniture and tasteful artwork. Yet all that luxury only made her feel more trapped. She wore a casual blouse and fitted pants, practical clothing compared to the designer gowns she used to prefer. Everything felt different since that public spectacle at Lucian's birthday party. She couldn't shake the sense that she was under house arrest, even though no official boundaries were set. Jasper Cross appeared in the doorway, wearing a crisp shirt unbuttoned at the collar. "You haven't been answering my calls," he remarked, half smiling. "I got worried." Audra crossed her arms. "I'm fine. Just a lot on my mind." "You mean Lucian?" Jasper's tone held a hint of irritation. She hesitated. "He's making trouble for Father. You and I both know Winston's furious. I heard he's even contacting Farnsworth." Jasper took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Look, Winston will do what's necessary to protect Archer Holdings, but you have to decide where you stand. Are you with us or with Lucian?" A flicker of guilt twisted in Audra's chest. She was the one who'd signed those divorce papers. She'd known exactly how and when they would be delivered. She also suspected Jasper had manipulated her into believing Lucian was siphoning funds, but now the cracks were everywhere. Had she made a terrible mistake? "I'm not with Lucian," she said stiffly. "But I'm not entirely comfortable with everything going on here." Jasper's gaze hardened. "Audra, you realize Winston would destroy Lucian if he can, right? We can't let him compromise the family business." Audra blinked, recalling Winston's sharp words the previous night. "Your husband is my enemy now. Remember that when you think about running back to him." She shivered. "I just want to be sure we're not crossing lines we'll regret," Audra murmured. Jasper forced a reassuring smile. "Trust me, we're doing what's necessary. You deserve better than Lucian, anyway." But as he placed a hand gently on her shoulder, Audra felt a chill. Jasper was always confident, always pushing the next agenda. She stepped away, noticing the flicker of annoyance on his face. Later, in the dim corridor outside Winston's study, Audra overheard fragments of a tense conversation. Winston was on the phone again, possibly with Farnsworth or another high-level contact. The few words she caught made her heart pound. "Must neutralize Lucian, he's too dangerous. Farnsworth insists we stop him at all costs." Audra backed away, fear turning her mouth dry. She'd known her father could be ruthless in business, but hearing that unfiltered talk about neutralizing Lucien, it felt chillingly real. Maybe the real reason she felt confined here was because Winston didn't trust her anymore. For the first time, Audra began to grasp the full scope of her father's ambition. If Lucien was messing with Archer Holdings, Winston would do anything, pull any string, crush any threat to maintain power. And if Farnsworth was involved, that meant bigger forces than she'd ever realized. "Am I part of this?" she whispered to herself, hugging her arms. "Am I complicit in whatever plan they're hatching?" She remembered better times with Lucien weekends at a lakeside cabin, quiet dinners where they'd talk about future dreams. Had it all been a lie, or had she thrown it away too easily? Her phone vibrated with a text from Jasper. "We need to coordinate. 10 minutes in the library." Audra sighed, forcing herself to breathe. She could sense the walls closing in. Winston wanted Lucien out of the picture, and Jasper seemed eager to help. She was caught in the middle, uncertain if she should stand by her father or find a way to warn her soon-to-be ex-husband of the danger looming. A cool wind rustled the leaves around a remote training facility on the outskirts of town. Lucien stepped onto a concrete pad beside Marcus, gazing at the simple obstacle course and a few old shipping containers repurposed for storage. They'd agreed to meet there for privacy and a chance to talk about old times. "This place brings back memories, huh?" Marcus remarked, glancing at the faded targets in the distance. "Yeah," Lucien exhaled. "It's been years since we had to run drills in terrain like this." Marcus flashed a small smile. "We survived worse together." A brief flashback rippled through Lucien's mind. He saw a desert outpost overseas, the sun blazing, dust whipping across a makeshift compound. He remembered how they'd been pinned down by enemy fire, how Marcus had dragged him to safety when a grenade landed too close. Lucien had returned the favor a week later, saving Marcus from a sniper's bullet. Their friendship was forged in the heat of life and death chaos. "I guess that's why I never doubted you," Lucien said softly, turning to face Marcus. "When you told me about Audra's suspicious bank transfers, I knew you wouldn't lie." Marcus nodded. "We've always had each other's backs. If I see trouble coming your way, I'll warn you no matter what." A crisp autumn breeze carried the scent of pine. Lucien clasped his hands behind his back, stepping around the facility's perimeter. "Let's talk about Farnsworth," Lucien said, voice lowering. "We both suspect he orchestrated what happened to Caldwell Investments all those years ago. But I don't have hard evidence yet, just faint leads." Marcus pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. "I've compiled info from public records and insider leaks. Farnsworth's name shows up indirectly in multiple acquisitions. He never appears on official documents, but shell companies link back to him." "He's a ghost," Lucien muttered. "One who stands behind Winston Archer. If Winston is the face, Farnsworth is the puppet master." They circled back toward a small open area scattered with training dummies. Leon Drake, one of Marcus's trusted acquaintances, was busy setting up a makeshift firing range. He gave them a salute-like gesture when they passed by. Marcus lowered his voice. "If Farnsworth's truly behind Winston's power, exposing him might be the key to toppling Archer Holdings, or at least forcing them to negotiate." Lucien stared at an old target with bullet holes peppered across its chest. "I'm not stopping until Farnsworth pays for what he did to my family. But first, we keep Winston on the defensive. Make him bleed resources. Sooner or later, Farnsworth will step in." He recalled the heartbreak in his parents' eyes after their business was dismantled. The sense of betrayal still gripped him like a phantom pain. Now that he was so close to unraveling the truth, he wouldn't give up. "We move carefully," Marcus said, resting a hand on Lucien's shoulder. "No heroics that'll get you killed. We both remember how fragile life can be." Lucien managed a faint smile. "Agreed. Let's keep the bullets on the practice field for now." At 9:30 in the evening, the top floor of Archer Holdings glowed under strategic lighting designed to impress high-profile clients. But tonight, the spacious executive boardroom was nearly empty. Only Winston Archer waited inside, checking his watch with impatience. The double doors swung open, and Lucien stepped in, wearing a dark suit that contrasted starkly with the gleaming white floors. The tension was immediate, as thick as the city fog rolling in outside. "You're punctual," Winston remarked tersely. Lucian shrugged. Didn't see a reason to be late. They stood on opposite sides of the long mahogany table. Framed city lights stretched out through floor-to-ceiling windows, a silent audience to the confrontation. Winston placed a folder on the table and tapped it. "Sign these documents, Lucian. You will relinquish your position at Archer Holdings, effective immediately." Lucian glanced at the folder. "So that's your solution. You push me out, I disappear, and everything goes back to normal?" A flicker of anger crossed Winston's features. "Given your meddling with certain real estate deals and supply chain nonsense in the press, you're toxic to our operations. Trust me when I say, this is me being generous." Lucian folded his arms. "Generous? You orchestrated a public humiliation at my birthday party. You and Jasper tried to frame me for embezzlement. You're still breathing, aren't you?" Winston snapped, voice low with menace. "Consider yourself lucky." For a heartbeat, neither man spoke. Outside the windows, the faint glow of headlights wove through the city streets far below, like distant fireflies. Lucian set his jaw. "I have no intention of signing anything. In fact," he reached into his jacket pocket, producing a USB drive. "I've compiled suspicious financial data from Archer Holdings' offshore transactions. I can tie them directly to you, Winston." Winston's eyes narrowed. "That's a bluff." "Is it?" Lucian's calm voice held an edge of triumph. "I've done my homework. If I were you, I'd focus on explaining these mysterious wire transfers and hidden accounts before you worry about ousting me." A beat of silence. Winston pressed his lips into a thin line, fury barely contained. "I see you've learned some underhanded tricks from that friend of yours." Lucian slid the USB back into his jacket. "You forced my hand. I told you before I won't let you destroy me the way you destroyed Caldwell Investments." Winston's posture stiffened at the mention of Lucian's family name. He inhaled sharply, then let out a venomous sigh. "So that's what this is all about. Ancient history. You're biting off more than you can chew, Lucian." Lucian shook his head slowly. "I think we both know you're in trouble right now. The board will ask questions if your offshore scams leak to the media. And they will leak, Winston." For a moment, Winston seemed to waver. Then he squared his shoulders. "I made you part of this family once. I can just as easily bury you." A faint, cold smile curved Lucian's lips. "Try." A brittle pause hung in the air. Finally, Winston huffed, snatching the unsigned documents off the table. "You'll regret crossing me, Caldwell." Lucian turned to leave, ignoring the knots of tension coiling in his gut. Before he reached the door, he glanced back, meeting Winston's glare. "No, Winston. You'll regret underestimating me." He exited the boardroom, heart pounding but resolute. Already he could picture Winston scrambling to contain the damage. Archer Holdings would soon feel the fallout, and Lucian was only getting started. Outside, the night air wrapped around him like a silent ally. He paused by the polished elevator doors, letting the magnitude of the confrontation sink in. The lines had been drawn more clearly than ever. Winston wanted him out, possibly destroyed. But Lucian wasn't the same naive young man who'd joined the Archer family with high hopes. He stepped into the elevator, pressed the lobby button, and watched the doors slide shut. His reflection stared back at him, steeled, determined. This was his battle now, and Winston Archer had just been forced onto the defensive. A brisk wind swept across the upper floors of the exclusive Farnsworth Tower, where vast windows reflected the city skyline. Behind those windows, Benedict Farnsworth sat in his plush leather chair, eyes cool as he listened to Winston Archer relay the latest developments. The office radiated understated opulence, fine art on the walls, soft lighting illuminating glass shelves filled with rare collectibles. Farnsworth wore a tailored charcoal suit, his silver hair combed neatly back. He gestured for Winston to take a seat on a couch upholstered in Italian leather. Winston complied, tension evident in his stiff posture. "So," Farnsworth said in a calm, measured tone, "Lucian Caldwell is more trouble than you anticipated." Winston Archer set down a folder of documents on the sleek coffee table. "More than that, he's actively undermining Archer Holdings. Real estate deals, supply chain controversies, The board is growing uneasy. I told you before, Farnsworth continued, interlacing his fingers. Lucian might become a thorn if not managed carefully. It appears your initial approach, public humiliation, only fueled his resolve. Winston's jaw twitched. He's prying into offshore accounts. We've done our best to conceal certain arrangements, but if Lucian keeps exposing irregularities, he'll eventually trip over your name, Benedict. A flicker of amusement passed across Farnsworth's face. My name never appears on official paperwork, Winston. You know how meticulously I operate. Still, Caldwell is persistent. Winston sounded almost desperate. I need your assistance to neutralize him before the situation escalates. Farnsworth rose from his seat and approached the floor-to-ceiling window. The city stretched below like a sea of lights. Neutralize. A strong word. He tapped a finger against the glass, contemplating. I prefer a more refined approach. Pressure him financially, isolate him socially, provoke internal conflicts. I'm certain we can nudge him into irrelevance. Winston cleared his throat. I worry time is running short. Our stock has wavered since he leaked those minor scandals. Minor indeed, Farnsworth said. Public opinion is fickle. However, if your corporate foundation cracks further, it might become a feeding frenzy. He turned around, meeting Winston's eyes. Rest assured, I have resources to contain the mess. But you must follow my instructions precisely. A sense of cold relief washed over Winston. He'd banked on Farnsworth's ability to move unseen, to manipulate entire markets from behind the curtain. Tell me what you need. Farnsworth's voice dropped. Information. Every last detail about Caldwell's finances, personal connections, weaknesses, and if his wife Audra, yes, has any sway in his decisions, we'll use that. He paused. After all, there was a time she could influence him intimately. Winston straightened. She's not in contact with him now, as far as I'm aware. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Farnsworth's lips curved in a thin smile. Good. Keep it that way. And if you sense her wavering, remind her where her loyalties lie. Understood, Winston replied, swallowing hard. I appreciate your guidance. Farnsworth waved a dismissive hand, stepping away from the window. Get me the data, Winston. In the meantime, I'll arrange certain fallback measures. With that, Winston left the lavish suite, clutching the folder that felt heavier than before. Farnsworth watched him go, a calculating glimmer in his eye. Lucian Caldwell had proven surprisingly resourceful, but Farnsworth had toppled bigger obstacles in his long, illustrious career. When the door clicked shut, Farnsworth tapped a panel on his desk, calling in a personal aide. Put me through to Albright Securities, he murmured. We have a situation requiring quiet adjustments. As the lines connected, Farnsworth's expression hardened. No one would dismantle the empire he'd built, certainly not a man clinging to an old family grudge. On a rainy afternoon, Lucian Caldwell navigated a winding corridor in a private research firm known only as Riverside Analytics. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reflecting off newly polished linoleum floors. Marcus Hale walked beside him, a manila folder under his arm. You said you found something big, Lucian noted, glancing at Marcus. Yeah, Marcus replied grimly. I've pieced together data from multiple shell companies. It all ties back to one name, Farnsworth. Benedict Farnsworth. Lucian's heartbeat kicked up. He'd heard Farnsworth's name in whispers, a rumored kingpin behind major corporate takeovers. But until now, it was guesswork. Let's see it. Marcus led him into a small, windowless office cluttered with servers. Flicking on a lamp, he spread out papers across a steel desk. We have bank statements from various Caribbean accounts. Most are controlled by an entity called Bright Light Investments. Guess who set that up? Farnsworth's legal team, though they hid it well. He's Winston's silent partner, Lucian said softly. So Farnsworth was the money man behind Archer Holdings' expansions. That means the old rumors are true. Marcus pointed to a timeline of transactions. It gets worse. 10 years ago, Farnsworth's network orchestrated a hostile takeover spree 3 small financial firms destroyed, including your parents' Caldwell Investments. We couldn't see Farnsworth's name on any official docs, but if you follow the money, it circles back to him. Lucian closed his eyes briefly, anger coiling in his chest. So Farnsworth was the invisible hand that crushed my family. This ties everything together, he murmured, scanning the documents. Winston's arrogance, Farnsworth's caution. They're two sides of the same coin. Marcus nodded. We have enough to suspect Farnsworth orchestrated those moves, but it's all circumstantial. We need airtight proof if we're going to nail him publicly. Lucian's fists tightened. I'll find proof. I'm done letting them operate in the shadows. A phone buzzed in Marcus's pocket. He glanced at it. One of my contacts in City Hall says Farnsworth's name is floating around. People suspect he's pulling strings to protect Archer Holdings from deeper investigations. No surprise, Lucian said. Winston must have turned to Farnsworth the moment we started shaking the tree. Flipping through more pages, Lucian paused at a particular record. A wire transfer to a place called Redwood Trust. The same trust that financed a series of smear campaigns against my father's reputation. Dad thought it was pure coincidence until he lost everything. Marcus exhaled, empathy flickering in his gaze. We'll make this right, Lucian. Let's keep investigating these shell companies. Farnsworth might slip up if Winston's empire starts to crumble. A resolute nod was Lucian's answer. He gently gathered the evidence, determination blazing in his eyes. Farnsworth wasn't just a phantom, it turned out he was the puppet master behind Archer Holdings. And now, Lucian finally had a thread to follow. Late evening shadows stretched across the Archer estate, where ornate lamps glowed along marble hallways. Audra Archer Caldwell stood outside her father's study, uncertain if she should knock. She heard Winston's voice inside, low, firm, unmistakably irritated. Her heart thudded. She'd grown up in these halls, but everything felt foreign now. Since the divorce papers were served, Winston's demands became sharper. Jasper Cross prowled around like a watchdog, and she felt the weight of something far darker swirling beneath the Archer name. Summoning courage, Audra pushed the door open. Winston sat behind an imposing oak desk, rummaging through files. He didn't bother hiding his annoyance as she entered. You'd better have a good reason to barge in, Winston said, barely glancing up. I just wanted to see if you needed me, she ventured, voice faltering. You've been acting so distant lately. Winston snorted, closing a thick binder. We're on the brink of crisis, Audra. Caldwell is undermining this family's legacy. No thanks to your ridiculous approach to the divorce. If you'd handled him better, maybe he'd be less hostile. Audra winced. She recalled the moment she handed the envelope over to that waiter, how she'd watched Lucian's face fall in front of the entire crowd. I thought that was what you wanted. Yes, but now we have a bigger mess to clean up. Winston's eyes flickered. If you really want to help, keep an ear out for any contact Lucian tries to make. Feed me the details. A knot formed in her stomach. Spying on Lucian? A spark of defiance pushed back against her guilt. I haven't spoken to him since that night. Good. Stay that way, Winston growled, retrieving another file. We can't afford you waffling. Keep your focus on Archer Holdings. Everything else is secondary. Audra suppressed a surge of rebellion. She managed a tight nod and excused herself. Out in the corridor, she nearly collided with Jasper Cross. He wore a half-smirk, arms folded casually. Trouble at the top? He teased. She glared. Eavesdropping again, Jasper? I prefer the term staying informed. You know Winston's under pressure. If you want to keep your comfortable life, do what he says. Audra's throat constricted. She turned away, not trusting herself to speak. As she headed toward her bedroom, she glimpsed a reflection in a gold-framed mirror, her own face, twisted with worry, a ghost of the confident woman she once was. That night, sleep eluded her. She scrolled through old photos on her phone, pictures of her and Lucian smiling by a lakeside, celebrating small victories in life. In one snapshot, he was planting a playful kiss on her cheek, love unmistakable in his eyes. Where did that love go, she wondered. Her mind whirled with the reality that Winston wanted to destroy Lucian. Jasper was complicit. And Farnsworth, the ominous figure overshadowing them all, was rumored to be even more ruthless. She felt caged, caught between loyalty to her father and remorse for betraying Lucian. The lines blurred between right and wrong, leaving her uncertain which path to choose. The next afternoon, Audra sat by a wide window overlooking the Archer estate gardens. Late autumn leaves danced in a mild breeze, swirling shades of copper and gold. She tried to calm her nerves by nursing a cup of herbal tea, but her hand trembled against the porcelain. In the distance, she heard Winston meeting with legal advisors. Jasper's voice occasionally interrupted, carrying that confident edge she'd come to despise. Her gut churned. She needed to do something before it was too late. Lucian was in real danger if Winston followed Farnsworth's lead. She retrieved her phone, hesitating only a second before scrolling to Lucian's name, a contact she hadn't used since the night she served those divorce papers. Her heart hammered as she tapped the screen. "Ring, ring, hello?" Lucian's voice came through, cautious. She swallowed. "It's me," she whispered. "Don't hang up." A charged silence. She imagined his face twisting with anger or suspicion, but he didn't end the call. "Audra, why are you calling?" "Because I have information," she said softly, "about Farnsworth, and about what Winston is planning. I think you should know before it escalates further." Lucian exhaled audibly. "I'm not sure I can trust a single word you say after what you pulled." "I know, but I swear this is genuine," she pleaded, voice trembling. "I can't stand by while they scheme to destroy you. There's more going on than you realize. Farnsworth isn't just a silent partner. He has a history with your family." Her throat tightened, recalling old papers locked in Winston's safe references to Caldwell investments, hush money transactions, Farnsworth's direct involvement. She hadn't read them all, but enough to suspect Farnsworth orchestrated everything from the shadows. "So, what do you want from me?" Lucian's tone was guarded. "A meeting," Audra said, glancing at the hallway to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "Just half an hour, somewhere safe. Let me show you what I've found." Another pause. She could almost hear him weighing the risks. "Fine," Lucian said at last. "Where?" "There's an old park by the riverfront Woodland Springs." "Tomorrow noon." "All right," he replied tersely. "But if this is another trap?" Audra flinched at the accusation she half expected. "It's not," she managed. "You'll see." She ended the call and sank back into the chair, adrenaline leaving her trembling. Was she betraying Winston? Or was she finally doing something right? There was no turning back now. The glass facade of Farnsworth Tower shimmered under the late afternoon sun, a proud monument to power. Inside a private conference room, Benedict Farnsworth stood by the panoramic window, speaking in a low, controlled tone to Winston Archer and Jasper Cross. "Caldwell has grown bolder," Farnsworth observed, eyes fixed on the skyline. "Our sources indicate he's gathering more evidence to destabilize Archer Holdings." Jasper, hands clasped behind his back, nodded in agreement. "He's already succeeded in rattling a few board members. Archer's stock is on shaky ground." Winston pulled at his tie, agitation clear. "If we don't stop him soon, the media will keep sniffing around. Caldwell's leaks have made us look incompetent or worse." Farnsworth turned, features calm as stone. "Incompetence can be forgiven. Criminality not so easily. We can't allow Lucian Caldwell to keep stirring trouble." He paused, then continued with a soft edge to his voice. "We need a solution off the public record." A tense hush fell. Winston finally spoke. "Meaning?" "I have contacts," Farnsworth said, "the sort who specialize in handling delicate matters. With the right nudge, they can set a trap something that looks like an accident or a random street crime. Either way, Caldwell would be out of our hair." Jasper shifted on his feet. "Is that really necessary?" Despite his usual swagger, the idea of arranging a lethal confrontation seemed to unnerve him. "A small push is all we need," Farnsworth replied. "Once Caldwell is removed or intimidated, we regain control." Winston cleared his throat, pushing aside lingering moral scruples. "He's meeting people all over town, sources, investigators, even potential allies. If we lure him in with some bogus opportunity, he'll walk right into it." "Precisely," Farnsworth said. "Now, Jasper, you still have your family's connections with private security contractors, yes?" Jasper glanced at Winston, saw no sign of dissent, then nodded. "They can be hired discreetly, but we'll have to feed Caldwell the right bait." Farnsworth allowed a thin smile. "I'm confident Winston can craft a believable scenario. A new investor eager to finance Caldwell's breakaway ventures, perhaps. Once he's isolated, we make our move. Winston exhaled, a mixture of tension and relief. I'll handle the setup. Jasper, contact your people. Let's coordinate. And Winston, Farnsworth added, voice crisp. Remember, this mustn't be traced to us. If Caldwell sniffs out anything suspicious, he'll go public with more accusations. Jasper and Winston exchanged glances. They understood the stakes. As Farnsworth strolled back toward the window, the atmosphere in the room felt heavier, as if the building itself disapproved of what was being plotted. We'll be careful, Winston affirmed. By the time Caldwell realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. Farnsworth merely inclined his head, his reflection in the glass revealing the faintest flicker of satisfaction. Outside, the city carried on, unaware that a deadly trap was being set for Lucien Caldwell. A brisk wind cut through the deserted parking lot near the industrial docks. Lucien Caldwell stepped out of his sedan, scanning the rows of steel shipping containers. It was evening, and the distant glow of city lights painted the sky in an orange haze. Every instinct told him this was risky, but the call he received a day before had been too enticing to ignore. "We have an anonymous investor interested in your new project," the voice on the phone said. "They prefer a private meeting." Lucien had debated the possibility of a setup, but if there was a chance to secure financial leverage against Archer Holdings, he had to at least check it out. Still, he'd come prepared. Marcus Hale was on standby with a small team, waiting in an SUV half a block away. He moved deeper between towering containers, the tang of salt water and motor oil thick in the air. Each step echoed ominously in the silence. Suddenly, footsteps. A pair of men in dark clothing emerged from behind a crate. Another two flanked him from the opposite side. Their expressions were cold, predatory. "Mr. Caldwell," one of them said, not bothering to hide the sneer. "We've been expecting you." Lucien's pulse spiked. There was no sign of any investor. His mouth tightened. "So I'm guessing this isn't about funding my venture." The men smirked in unison. Without further pretense, the first thug lunged fast, but Lucien dodged, narrowly avoiding the blow. He pivoted, adrenaline flooding his system, recalling instincts honed years ago in military operations. A second assailant tried to seize his arm, but Lucien twisted free. "You picked the wrong guy to jump," Lucien growled, stepping back, fists raised. Yet 4 against 1 was grim math. They circled him, flickers of cruelty in their eyes. One produced a telescopic baton with a menacing snap. A sudden clang reverberated, a large shipping container shifting behind them. Marcus appeared at the far end of the lane, shouting, "Lucien, move!" The ambushers spun around. Marcus opened fire with a non-lethal beanbag shotgun. The crack of compressed air startled them, giving Lucien a second to sprint behind a row of containers. One thug doubled over, winded by the impact of a beanbag. "We gotta fall back," barked another attacker, panic creeping into his voice. They scattered, returning fire with small handguns, clearly not concerned about subtlety anymore. Sparks ricocheted off the metal crates. Marcus ducked behind a forklift, returning a volley. The short but fierce exchange ended when the attackers realized they were outflanked. 2 more of Marcus's associates arrived, weapons drawn, forcing the ambushers to flee. In seconds, it was over. The thugs vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only the echo of footsteps and the tang of gunpowder. Lucien pressed himself against a shipping container, breathing hard. He hadn't expected them to be so brazen. Marcus jogged over, scanning the perimeter. "You all right?" Lucien nodded, straightening, adrenaline still pumping. They weren't amateurs, and they definitely weren't random muggers. "No," Marcus agreed, reloading carefully. "Somebody wants you out of the picture." Lucien's gaze hardened. "Farnsworth. He's escalated this war from corporate sabotage to attempted murder." They heard sirens wailing in the distance. Someone must have reported gunshots. Marcus gestured for them to retreat. As they hurried back to the SUV, Lucien's mind churned with realization. Farnsworth and Winston had crossed a line. This wasn't just about money or reputation anymore. It was about survival. Night had settled heavily over the city when Lucien stepped into his penthouse, still tense from the docks. The sound of traffic far below droned like a restless sea. Flicking on a lamp, he pulled off his jacket, wincing at the bruises forming on his arm. He froze at the faint vibration of his phone. An unknown number again, but something told him to answer. Lucian? It was Audra. Her voice was tense, almost breathless. He exhaled, torn between anger and lingering affection. Audra, whatever it is, make it quick. You have to listen, she whispered. It's Farnsworth. He's orchestrating everything he told my father to shut you down by any means. I overheard them talking about a private contractor. I'm guessing you've already seen what that means. Lucian's grip tightened on the phone. They tried to kill me tonight. Thanks for the heads up, he said, sarcasm razor-sharp. I'm sorry, Audra said, voice cracking. I didn't know details, just that Farnsworth was pushing for something drastic. You have to be careful. He has resources you can't imagine, political ties, law enforcement contacts. He'll bury you. A swirl of conflicting emotions roiled in Lucian's chest. Could he trust her? But she sounded genuinely scared. So why warn me? Because I hate what this has become, Audra whispered. And I don't want you dead, Lucian. Not like this. He let out a harsh breath. You set me up for a public divorce? Tried to frame me for embezzlement, and now you expect me to trust you? No, she replied softly. I don't expect trust. But I couldn't stand by while Farnsworth and my father planned more attacks. Please just watch your back. Farnsworth might not stop next time. Lucian closed his eyes, recalling the savage ambush at the docks. Fine, he said quietly. I appreciate the heads-up, but this doesn't change the fact we're on opposite sides. A pause. Through the phone, he heard Audra inhale as if battling tears. I know, she murmured. Still, be careful. If you need, she trailed off, then ended the call. For a long moment, Lucian stood motionless. A part of him wanted to dismiss her warnings, but everything about tonight proved she was right. Farnsworth was done playing games. Lucian tossed the phone onto a nearby table. He wouldn't let pity or regret cloud his judgment, yet a nagging flicker of gratitude lingered. At least Audra had tried to reach out. Morning rays filtered through the tall windows of Marcus Hale's discreet office, where multiple screens displayed financial charts and social media feeds. Lucian rubbed a lingering bruise on his wrist as he studied a newly compiled file. It's time to go public with more of what we have, Marcus said, tapping a keyboard. We can't let Farnsworth or Winston think they can silence us. Lucian nodded, leaning over a screen that showed Archer Holdings' internal memos. We leak these internal communications about falsified inventory. It's small enough not to reveal our entire hand, but big enough to stir an investigation. Marcus brought up a local journalist's contact info. Joanna Rhodes from the City Times might bite. She's known for uncovering corporate corruption. Send it, Lucian said, face grim. We'll confirm authenticity off the record. Let her run with it. Moments later, Marcus fired off an encrypted email. They then turned to a second angle. Evidence linking Winston Archer to questionable overseas ventures. Lucian knew it might not topple Farnsworth outright, but it would tighten the noose around Archer Holdings. Within hours, headlines began popping up on financial blogs. Archer Holdings mired in inventory fraud allegations. A few mainstream outlets picked it up, fueling public outrage. Online, speculation exploded. Shareholders demanded explanations, and the Archer board scrambled. At Archer Tower, Winston fumed in a locked meeting room, phone pressed to his ear. Jasper paced anxiously near the windows. We had a plan to handle Caldwell discreetly, Winston hissed, glancing at his phone's newsfeed. But now there's a media circus. Jasper's face was ashen. I spoke to Farnsworth. He says keep calm. He's making calls to neutralize the situation. Keep calm, Winston repeated, eyes blazing. We're bleeding money. The board is furious. Caldwell is winning the PR war. A beep interrupted them. Winston lifted the phone, reading a fresh report of Archer's stock dipping another 5%. He slammed his fist on the table. Farnsworth wanted Caldwell out of the picture, but we couldn't even do that right, he muttered. Jasper shook his head. Look, let's regroup. Farnsworth is still confident. He just wants us to weather this storm until he can pull certain strings behind the scenes. Winston sank into a chair, heart pounding. Pull strings? Farnsworth might manipulate a few regulators, bribe some politicians, but if Lucian continued leaking evidence, no amount of backroom influence would hide the scandal forever. Meanwhile, Lucian stood by a TV in Marcus's office, watching a broadcast on Archer Holdings' slump. A sense of satisfaction warred with the dread he felt after last night's ambush. Farnsworth was still out there, no doubt planning a counterstrike. "We've rattled them," Marcus said. "But Farnsworth doesn't spook easily. He'll have a plan B, maybe plan C, too." Lucian nodded. "He's probably working channels at high levels, trying to muzzle these stories. We need to keep feeding solid proof to the media so the authorities can't ignore it." A text pinged on Lucian's phone from an unknown number. "Well played, Caldwell. The next move is ours." He showed Marcus, who frowned. "A threat," Marcus said. "Could be Farnsworth or Winston or someone on their payroll." Lucian's jaw tightened. "They can threaten all they want. We're not backing down." He thought of the gunfire that rattled the docks, the phone call from Audra. Farnsworth had gone from covert sabotage to overt violence. Yet Archer Holdings was crumbling under public scrutiny, and Farnsworth's name was whispered in darker corners of the internet. The conflict had reached a tipping point. "Let them come," Lucian murmured, setting his phone aside. "We'll be ready." Afternoon sunlight fell across the Archer estate gardens, casting warm gold onto carefully trimmed hedges. Audra Archer stood in the private library, scanning rows of leather-bound volumes she had perused countless times in childhood. But today, her mind was elsewhere, haunted by the realization that Farnsworth, not just Winston Archer, was the ultimate threat to Lucian. She clutched a small key in her hand, retrieved from an old jewelry box, her mother's jewelry box. The faint memory of her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "If anything happens to me, Audra, there's a safe place you should check." Taking a deep breath, Audra moved to a discreet panel behind an antique bookshelf, pressing the key into a concealed lock. With a soft click, the panel slid open, revealing a narrow storage compartment. Inside lay a small metal box, unremarkable except for a single faded label that read Eleanor Archer, her mother's name. Her heart pounded as she gingerly opened it. A swirl of dust rose, and she found a stack of letters, a worn journal, and a flash drive. The first letter, dated nearly 15 years prior, bore her mother's elegant handwriting. Carefully unfolding it, Audra began to read. "My dearest daughter, if you found this, I'm sorry. It means I'm not there to protect you. By now, you'll know that your father, Winston, is tangled with Benedict Farnsworth, an arrangement that has led to dark deeds. The Caldwell family, they were once friends to me, but Winston allowed Farnsworth to destroy them for profit. I tried to intervene, but Farnsworth wields power beyond what you can imagine." Audra's hand shook. So her mother had known about Farnsworth's direct involvement in the Caldwell downfall years before Lucian even suspected. Another paragraph revealed that Farnsworth had not only orchestrated the ruin of Caldwell Investments, but also forced Winston to facilitate hush money deals and blackmail campaigns. It was the first concrete evidence that Farnsworth had personally ordered the elimination of any obstacles, including Lucian's parents. Near the bottom of the box, Audra discovered a USB drive labeled Freckards. She recalled her mother's cautionary whispers. "Keep this safe, Audra. One day it might save lives." "Mom," she murmured, tears prickling her eyes. "You knew everything." Footsteps sounded in the hallway outside, and she tensed. Quickly, she locked the box, pressing it to her chest. No one could discover she'd found these items, especially not Winston or Jasper. Slipping the box under her sweater, Audra exited the hidden compartment and eased the bookshelf panel closed. Her heart thudded with both hope and dread. She had found a direct link between Farnsworth and her father's sins, a link that could finally prove Farnsworth was behind the Caldwell tragedy. "I can't keep this hidden anymore," she thought, making her way toward her bedroom. "Lucian needs the truth, even if it means turning my back on my father for good." A gentle drizzle soaked the riverfront park called Willow Bend, where Audra had asked Lucian Caldwell to meet in secret. The sky was iron gray, reflecting Lucian's guarded mood. He stood by a wooden footbridge, tension in every line of his posture. When Audra approached under a navy umbrella, water dripping off the edges, she couldn't help but notice how tired Lucian looked, shadows under his eyes. a subtle bruise on his jaw from the recent ambush. "I'm surprised you came," she said softly. "You made it sound important," he replied, voice clipped. "Let's make this quick." They found a secluded bench beneath an old willow tree, its branches swaying in the damp wind. Audra glanced around, ensuring no one had followed. Then she produced the metal box from her purse and opened it, revealing the letters and USB drive. "These were my mother's," Audra began, ignoring the icy look in Lucian's eyes. "She left them hidden, warning me that Farnsworth was behind your parents' downfall. This drive, it has more detailed records, transactions, notes, emails. Enough to expose Farnsworth's direct role in the Caldwell destruction." Lucian's jaw tightened. "Why show me this now? After everything you did signing divorce papers, trying to pin embezzlement on me." A flash of regret crossed her face. "I know. I can't undo that. But I realized too late how far Farnsworth and my father would go. I'm trying to at least make it right." The drizzle turned into heavier rain, pattering on the umbrella. Lucian gently took the USB from her hand, gaze flicking between her face and the device. She could see conflict swirling in his eyes, anger, suspicion, maybe even a sliver of relief. "If this data truly proves Farnsworth orchestrated my parents' ruin, it's the biggest leverage I've ever had," he said carefully. "But how do I know you're not baiting me into another trap?" Audra inhaled shakily. "You don't. I get it. But I promise this is genuine. My mother's own notes confirm Farnsworth gave the order to remove Caldwell Investments from competition. She even wrote how Winston regretted it, though he never stopped Farnsworth." A moment of silence stretched as Lucian scanned a snippet of the letter, the realization of Farnsworth's involvement etched across his features. Rain dripped down the back of his collar, but he didn't flinch. Finally, he closed his eyes, voice tense with emotion. "My parents, they never saw it coming. Farnsworth used your father like a weapon." "Yes," Audra whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I'm so sorry, Lucian. I swear I never wanted you harmed, only I was desperate to please my father, to keep the Archer name untarnished. I see now how blind I was." Lucian looked at her for a long beat, then sighed. "We can't change the past. But if these files are real, we can hold Farnsworth accountable." Audra nodded, pressing the box into his hands. "I want you to have everything, because Farnsworth won't stop until you're destroyed or dead." A flicker of gratitude crossed Lucian's hardened expression. "Thank you." He paused, exhaling slowly. "You realize Winston won't forgive this betrayal. Farnsworth even less so." Audra managed a sad smile. "I know, but I can't keep living under their shadow, watching them try to kill you. It's too far gone." A tension-laden hush followed. In that brief moment, they were just two people under a willow tree in the rain, tied by love once shared and a history marred by betrayal. Audra reached out to touch Lucian's arm, but he pulled back, an ache flickering across his face. "I'm not sure if I'll ever forgive you," he said quietly, "but I'm grateful you did this." She nodded, tears mixing with raindrops. "I understand." They parted ways without an embrace, each consumed by the knowledge that Farnsworth's next move would be swift and ruthless. Lucian hurried off with the evidence clutched under his coat, resolved to confront the truth behind his family's tragedy. Audra stayed behind, letting the rain soak into her hair, the memory of what they once had colliding with the reality of what they'd become. That evening, a thunderstorm raged over Manhattan, lightning illuminating the Archer Holdings skyscraper. Lucian stood in the building's executive lobby, ignoring the curious stares of late-working employees. He carried a folder containing select prints of the damning evidence from Audra's USB. A security guard tried to stop him from reaching the top floor, but one glare and a mention of urgent business made the guard falter. Lucian strode into Winston Archer's office unannounced, rainwater dripping from his overcoat. Winston Archer, hunched over his desk, snapped upright. "Caldwell? How dare you?" "Save it," Lucian growled, tossing the folder onto the desk. "We need to talk. Now." Jasper Cross, seated near the window, rose immediately, alarm in his eyes. "You've got some nerve storming in here, Caldwell." Lucian ignored Jasper, locking his gaze on Winston. "I have proof, Winston. Proof that Farnsworth orchestrated the destruction of my parents' company and that you helped him every step of the way. Hush money. Falsified deals, all of it. Winston's face paled. He glanced at the open folder, saw printouts of emails, receipts, and transaction records linking him to Farnsworth's covert shell corporations. He pressed his lips tight, anger warring with fear. How did you? Winston began, voice faltering. Jasper moved closer, eyeing the documents. A flicker of panic crossed his expression. He clearly recognized how incriminating they were. Lucian jabbed a finger at Winston. I'm done letting you hide behind Farnsworth. Either you come clean about the sabotage of Caldwell Investments, or I release everything to the press and the authorities. Silence rumbled like distant thunder. Winston's posture collapsed slightly, shoulders slumping under the weight of years of complicity. Caldwell, you don't realize how much Farnsworth controls. He's got political connections, government officials. If you publicly accuse him, you risk everything. Maybe, Lucian retorted, voice shaking with pent-up rage. But I'll see Farnsworth answer for my parents. And if you're too scared to stand against him, that's your choice. But your precious Archer Holdings is already crumbling. Jasper attempted to intervene. Listen, Lucian, we can negotiate. There's no reason to burn the entire empire. Shut up, Jasper, Lucian snapped. We're past negotiation. Unless Winston admits publicly how Farnsworth directed him to ruin my family, I have no incentive to hold back. A tortured moment passed. Winston's gaze flicked between Lucian's furious stance, the incriminating evidence, and Jasper's silent plea. Finally, Winston swallowed hard. You have no idea what Farnsworth does to people who betray him. But maybe I can't keep this charade going anymore. He inhaled deeply. Fear etched on his face. Yes, Farnsworth was behind it all. I let him manipulate the acquisitions, paid off accountants, forced Caldwell Investments into fraudulent deals. I regret it now, but Farnsworth's reach is endless. Then make a statement, Lucian said, temper flaring. Admit it to the board, the media. Tell the truth and implicate Farnsworth. It might be the only way you salvage anything from this mess. Winston closed his eyes, as if already imagining Farnsworth's wrath. But in Lucian's unwavering stare, he saw no mercy. Slowly, he nodded. I'll do it. I'll talk. A flicker of triumph passed over Lucian's features. Good. You have 24 hours. After that, I go public, with or without you. Jasper watched helplessly as Lucian turned on his heel and strode out, the echoes of heavy footsteps trailing behind. Thunder shook the windows, punctuating the gravity of Winston's confession. In that charged silence, Winston sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Farnsworth would not forgive such betrayal, but Winston had no choice left. Either comply or watch everything he cherished fall apart under the brutal onslaught of Lucian Caldwell's retribution. The next evening, Benedict Farnsworth hosted a lavish charity gala at a 5-star hotel, the ballroom glittering with chandeliers and high society guests. Smooth jazz played while servers in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne. Publicly, Farnsworth was the gracious philanthropist. Privately, he was bracing for Winston's possible defection. In a secluded lounge off the main ballroom, Farnsworth took measured sips of aged scotch, waiting for Winston's arrival. A handful of political allies drifted in and out, offering polite greetings and small talk. Farnsworth's calm demeanor betrayed none of the tension swirling beneath his composed exterior. Suddenly, the lounge doors swung open. But it wasn't Winston Archer who appeared, it was Lucian Caldwell, wearing a dark suit and an expression of grim determination. Farnsworth's brows rose fractionally. Mr. Caldwell, he said smoothly, I must confess, I didn't expect to see you here. I assumed your invitation had been lost in the mail. I don't need an invitation, Lucian replied, stepping closer. I'm here for answers and to deliver a message. A flicker of annoyance crossed Farnsworth's refined features. Is that so? By all means, enlighten me. Lucian held up a small stack of documents. I've got Winston's confession, plus files from Audra's mother enough to prove you orchestrated the downfall of Caldwell Investments years ago. You destroyed my parents to expand your empire. Farnsworth swirled his scotch, unruffled. And what do you plan to do with such accusations? Shout them from a soapbox? Perhaps you've forgotten I have connections in very high places. I know exactly who you have in your pocket, senators, regulators, maybe even law enforcement. But the media's not so easily bought, especially if we go global. And you'd be surprised how quickly your so-called allies abandon ship when they sense scandal. Farnsworth set his glass down, a steely glint in his eye. You're playing a dangerous game, Caldwell. I could snuff you out like a candle. You already tried that, Lucian shot back, voice low with anger. Didn't work. Silence stretched, the soft notes of jazz drifting in from the ballroom. Farnsworth exhaled, feigning amusement. What exactly do you want? Lucian leaned in. Simple. Stop coming after me. Back off Archer Holdings. Winston's ready to blow the whistle. If you push further, you'll face a public scandal the likes of which you've never seen. A mocking smirk curled Farnsworth's lips. You still don't understand power, do you? I can ruin you in 1,000 ways, freeze your accounts, discredit your evidence, even turn your allies against you. Don't mistake a few skirmishes for a victory. Lucian's gaze burned. We'll see who stands when this is over. He stepped back, letting Farnsworth see the unwavering resolve in his eyes. I won't stop until you answer for my parents' death. Farnsworth's expression hardened. He reached for his scotch again, his free hand tightening around the glass. You should consider my offer. I can be generous money, influence, even your own piece of the corporate world. All you need do is walk away from this crusade. And let's not forget Audra. He paused, a sardonic gleam in his eye. She was once my suggestion, didn't Winston tell you? To ensure you'd be malleable, but that clearly backfired. A flash of pain and betrayal flickered across Lucian's face at the mention of Audra as a pawn, but it only stoked his fury. No deal, he ground out. Keep your blood money. I'm finishing what I started. Without waiting for Farnsworth's response, Lucian spun on his heel and exited. In the main ballroom, guests obliviously sipped champagne, ignorant of the storm gathering behind closed doors. Left alone, Farnsworth drained his glass. Outside, cameras flashed in the hands of society reporters covering the charity event. He clenched his jaw, realizing the precarious position he now faced. Winston's potential confession and Lucian's evidence threatened to crumble everything he'd built. Yet a chilly determination flared in Farnsworth's eyes. He hadn't ruled out one final decisive strike. Nightfall draped the skyline in shimmering lights as Lucian Caldwell and Marcus Hale convened in a small, discreet warehouse on the city's outskirts. The glow of distant headlights glimmered through narrow windows, illuminating a makeshift command station, computers, surveillance feeds, and a large world map pinned with red markers. Marcus glanced up from his laptop, grim-faced. Farnsworth's on the move. I intercepted chatter suggesting he's hired new contractors military grade. They're no amateurs. Lucian exhaled, tension coiling in his shoulders. He's doubling down. Guess he's done trying to pressure me quietly. He's desperate, Marcus agreed. Word is, Farnsworth leveraged a senator to stall the SEC investigation, but the media pressure from your last leak is overwhelming them. He can't hide in the shadows anymore. Suddenly, the warehouse door slid open. Fiona Mills, one of Marcus's trusted team members, stepped inside with urgent steps. Her expression said it all. We have a potential location, an abandoned industrial zone near the old harbor. Farnsworth's new strike team might be assembling there. Lucian's jaw tightened. So he wants to corner us or at least set up a vantage point to strike. I'd bet on it, Fiona said. They're well-funded and well-armed. We can't wait for them to come to us. Marcus glanced at Lucian. What's the plan? Lucian wiped a hand over his face. He remembered how Farnsworth's men had nearly killed him once before. We need to secure our own perimeter. If Farnsworth is bringing heavy hitters, we can't just sit here. We draw them out, neutralize the threat. A hush fell. This was no longer a battle of paperwork and leaked documents. Farnsworth had turned it into a war zone. Lucian swallowed a bitter knot of anger. He wants me dead so he can salvage his empire. But Lucian refused to give Farnsworth that victory. We set up a decoy, Lucian decided. Let Farnsworth's people think I'm heading to the docks for a meeting. Meanwhile, we'll have a team lying in wait. Marcus nodded slowly. We've done covert ops before. This is personal, but we can handle it. Fiona pulled up a map on her tablet. pointing to a cluster of warehouses near the harbor. "We block these access routes, place watchers on the rooftops. If Farnsworth's men show up, we pin them." A tight grimace crossed Lucian's face. "I never wanted it to come to this. But Farnsworth gave me no choice." Elsewhere that evening, in a dimly lit penthouse overlooking the city, Benedict Farnsworth paced across a marble floor, phone pressed to his ear. On the other end, a low voice confirmed the arrival of a special operations group mercenaries with hush-hush backgrounds. "Very good," Farnsworth purred, stepping onto his balcony. City lights glowed below like a field of fireflies. "I trust they understand the target. Caldwell must be eliminated, along with any inconvenient associates." He ended the call, swirling a glass of expensive whiskey. In the reflection on the balcony door, he glimpsed a man under siege, yet refused to acknowledge vulnerability. "I've toppled entire corporate dynasties. I won't let one vengeful man bring me down." Farnsworth's gaze hardened. "Caldwell forced my hand. Now I'll force his." By midday, the city was abuzz with rumors. Major news outlets teased an exclusive report on an influential power broker, someone rumored to pull strings in both finance and politics. Lucian's evidence had begun trickling to investigative journalists, fueling curiosity. Meanwhile, insider tips from Winston Archer placed Farnsworth under increasing scrutiny. In a small conference room at a local TV station, Joanna Rhodes, a relentless investigative reporter, received a package hand-delivered by one of Lucian's team members. Inside, she found scanned documents, recordings, and a short note. "Use this well. The truth can't be silenced." Stunned, Joanna immediately recognized names: Farnsworth, Archer, certain politicians. She realized the scope of the corruption could rock the entire financial sector. Dialing her producer, she arranged a special segment for the evening broadcast. That afternoon, a chain reaction ensued. Leaked audio implicating Farnsworth's minions in money laundering surfaced online, sending shockwaves across social media. Federal agents, seeing the media storm, launched preliminary probes. The hush-hush deals Farnsworth had orchestrated started unraveling. In the middle of the chaos, Winston Archer, shaken by Lucian's confrontation, finally complied with a subpoena. He arrived at a federal office, accompanied by lawyers, to give a sworn statement. As the press swarmed outside, Winston looked hollow, overshadowed by regret. Jasper Cross, tailing behind Winston, was soon detained for questioning regarding his involvement in orchestrating attempts on Lucian's life. A cluster of journalists captured photos of Jasper in handcuffs, fueling the media frenzy. "I had no choice, Farnsworth forced me," Jasper spat at the cameras, desperation in his eyes. At the Archer estate, federal officers arrived with a warrant. They combed through offices, seizing documents and computer drives. Servants whispered fearfully in corridors. The once pristine empire of Archer Holdings was in disarray. A subdued Audra watched from an upstairs window, eyes rimmed with fatigue. She'd known this day would come the moment she handed Lucian the final evidence. Part of her felt relief she'd broken free from Farnsworth's grip. But as she witnessed Winston being led away, she felt a twinge of mourning for the father she once admired. When officers approached Audra, they informed her she might be detained for further questioning. She barely blinked, nodding in acceptance. Whatever it takes. She'd aided Lucian in unveiling Farnsworth's crimes, so perhaps leniency awaited. But her father's downfall stung like a final betrayal. Night hung heavy over a stark detention center downtown. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Lucian passed through security checkpoints. He had come to see Audra now in custody, though not officially charged. A sympathetic federal agent allowed him a brief visit. In a plain interrogation room, Audra sat behind a metal table, her hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. She gazed up the moment Lucian stepped in, anxiety flickering across her features. "They told me you were coming," she said, voice subdued. "I wasn't sure you'd bother." Lucian took the seat opposite her. A hush lingered, broken only by the hum of the overhead lights. Finally, he spoke quietly. "I needed to see where we stand." She managed a small, sad smile. "We stand on opposite sides of a crumbling empire, I guess." She gestured to the bleak surroundings. "Winston's being arraigned. Jasper's already facing charges. I'm caught in the crossfire." Lucian's gaze softened. though the old hurt still lingered behind his eyes. I heard you cooperated with the feds. That might help reduce the charges they pin on you, if any. Your father's admissions sealed Farnsworth's fate, but they also implicate everyone who was part of it. Audra dropped her gaze. I know. I never wanted it to end like this. When I married you, I genuinely cared, but I let my father's ambitions cloud everything. Memories rushed back quiet dinners, romantic weekends, the sense of partnership he'd once cherished, now overshadowed by betrayal and heartbreak. I believed in us, Lucian murmured, voice raw. You broke that trust in front of the entire world. I can't pretend I can just forgive and forget. She swallowed hard, tears pooling. I don't expect forgiveness. I only wanted to make things right, at least at the end. Even if it meant losing everything, my inheritance, my father's trust. A tear slipped down her cheek. And your love. A charged silence fell. Lucian closed his eyes, exhaling a tremulous breath. I won't push for harsher sentencing, he said quietly. I told the investigators how you helped me expose Farnsworth. If that spares you from the worst, consider it a final mercy. Her shoulders trembled. Thank you. She lifted her gaze, searching his expression. Does this mean there's any chance? He shook his head gently, pain flickering in his eyes. No, we're done, Audra. Our story ended the night you handed me those papers. Fresh tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't argue. She sensed the finality in his tone. Slowly, she reached across the table as if to grasp his hand. He withdrew, the distance between them unbridgeable. I'm sorry, Audra whispered. For everything. Lucian rose, the metal chair scraping. I hope you find a path forward, Audra. We can't undo the past, but maybe you can live differently now. She nodded, voice breaking. Goodbye, Lucian. Without another word, he turned and walked away. The door clanged shut behind him, leaving Audra alone in the sterile room, tears falling unheeded. The final chapter of their relationship had closed, marked by shattered trust and lingering remorse. Morning sunlight filtered through the swirling fog of a quiet cemetery in the countryside. Lucian Caldwell approached two modest gravestones, his footsteps slow, reverent. He knelt, placing a bouquet of simple white flowers at the base. The headstones bore the names of his parents, lost so many years ago to Farnsworth's ruthless machinations. For a long moment, he simply gazed at the inscriptions, remembering warm smiles and gentle encouragement. He wondered if they'd be proud of how he'd fought back. Soft wind rustled the nearby trees, as though whispering an answer. It's over, he murmured, voice trembling with a blend of relief and sorrow. I did everything I could to bring their crimes to light. Farnsworth, he'll pay, and I won't let them hurt anyone else the way they hurt you. He bowed his head, a sense of peace unfurling despite the grief. So much had led to this moment: betrayals, revelations, near-death encounters. Yet he'd emerged, battered but unbroken. Eventually, Lucian rose, brushing leaves from his coat. As he turned, Marcus Hale stood a respectful distance away, hands in pockets. Marcus offered a small nod of understanding, letting Lucian have his quiet farewell. They walked back toward a waiting car. Any news from the feds? Lucian asked. They've frozen Farnsworth's accounts, indicted half his network, Marcus replied. He's refusing to cut a deal, so a long trial awaits. Winston and Jasper are fully cooperating, and Audra's likely to get partial immunity. She's stuck in a legal labyrinth, though. Lucian exhaled. At least the truth is out. The families Farnsworth destroyed like mine finally have a chance at justice. Marcus gave him a half-smile. What now? You've spent years on this mission. They climbed into the vehicle, the countryside slipping behind them. Lucian gazed at the rolling fields, the sun cresting the horizon. A new dawn. We build something better, he said quietly. Axiom Capital can evolve, help small businesses threatened by predators like Farnsworth. Make sure no one else endures what my parents went through. A flicker of determination lit Marcus's eyes. Count me in. They drove back toward Manhattan, city towers rising in the distance like silent sentinels. For the first time in years, Lucian didn't feel the weight of old ghosts on his shoulders. He pictured the future a chance to honor his parents' legacy by defending those who couldn't defend themselves. Sometime later, they pulled up to a modern office building in Midtown. "Let's talk expansion," Marcus suggested, nodding at the top floors. "A bigger team, broader scope, maybe a pro bono department for entrepreneurs who need legal and financial muscle." Lucian smiled faintly, stepping onto the bustling sidewalk. Horns blared, business people rushed past, and life surged around them. He felt more alive than he had in years. "Yes," he said, inhaling the crisp air. "It's time we did some real good in this city." With that, Lucian Caldwell disappeared into the Manhattan crowd, a man no longer defined by vengeance, but by the promise of what he could create. The final notes of bitterness faded, replaced by a calm sense of purpose. He would carry his parents' memory forward, forging a future that honored the past without being trapped by it.